Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in today for the Champaign Public Library Free Comic Book Day. I'm Kat Purcell, and I'm in the Adult Services Department here at the library. We're very excited for Free Comic Book Day and very excited to introduce Sweetie Boo, who is a Marvel artist, an artist in her own right. She's done titles like Eat and Love Yourself on her own, and then also does a lot of the art for Marvel Rising Captain Marvel. So with that, I'm going to turn it on over to you. Do you want to go ahead and do a little introduction and tell us about yourself, Sweeney?
Yeah, so hi everyone. I'm Sweeney Boo. I'm from Canada. I worked also, like you said, on In Love Yourself, which came out last year with Boom Studios. Um, I've worked on Marvel Action Captain Marvel, and I've done a bunch of covers for Archie, DC, and other things that I can't remember right now. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Just another generic question. How did you get into comics?
I grew up in France, and I used to be very into the comic book industry over there, so the bande dessinée. Um, my first goal was to get in that. I was reading a lot of Witch and comic books like that when I was growing up, and it was always very attractive to me. And around when I was like 15, my boyfriend at the time introduced me to like some Iron Man and like Spider-Man comic books, and it just blew my mind. And I was just like, this is amazing. This is so dynamic and fun. And
Um,
yeah.
it says I'm streaming.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, nothing. That was just an accident on my part. We're all good.
Okay, great. You mentioned Witch, and that was actually one of my first entryways into comics too. I remember one of my earliest memories with comics is like going into a Barnes and Noble and finding the combination like comic book novel books that they put out for that. Were those some of the
Yes.
titles that you picked up too?
Yeah, I actually not long ago like bought them all again because they like the way they used to come out in France was like in a magazine with like it's like a mini magazine that we had, so we had like 30 pages every month. So it was our own monthly comic book kind of, and that was awesome.
That's great. So tell me a little bit about when you made Eat and Love Yourself. I believe that one was a Kickstarter, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the story I was collaborating with someone at the time, and the story we started working on in like 2015 together. It's based on my own struggles with my own eating disorder. Um, and so over the few years that the story evolved, that we worked together, we were like, why not just like try Kickstarter? I had so very little knowledge of finding a publisher. I just knew I wanted to do the book and have fun with it. Uh, so we did the Kickstarter, and it was great. It was a really good experience. It was funded, and I don't know, 6 months later, I met some people from Boom Studios, and things just like got like from there.
That's great.
Yeah.
When the idea came to you, did it come to you more as like a story where you worked on the writing part of it? Or because I know obviously you're an
Mhm.
artist, did the art part of it come to you first?
It's interesting. The way story comes to me usually is that I'm gonna draw a character, and I'm gonna be like, I really like this character and I want to do something with them. And often like a glimpse of idea is just gonna come and it's gonna evolve into something. But that's often the way I create. It's just I randomly create a character that just speaks to me. So that's how Mindy got to be Mindy.
That's great. I read it myself, and although that's not an issue I've struggled with, I definitely related to the pressures she puts on herself,
Mhm.
but then how those interact with the pressures she feels from other people in her life. So that was a question I wanted to ask you. Like, what are some things having come through writing this and then experience some of this on your own? How do you deal with some of those pressures?
That's a very good question. I feel like even when I started working on it, that's not necessarily something that I was able to work on but having this like being the narrator of my own story somehow was very cathartic. And I feel like you have to be able to tune out, even it's easy to say, but tune out those like voices in your head. And because we're often our worst enemy, like the things that we tell to ourselves, we wouldn't tell to a friend, you know? So it's being able to be, I would say, this like third person, to be like entirely objective with those voices that you have that are like so negative all the time. So that's like this different view, I guess, that working on the book gave me, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've noticed with myself too, is sometimes those internal voices are more harsher than anything I've heard, but it just then repeats. So I would definitely relate when you made that comment about have that third person kind of ultimate voice in your head, like, no, it's okay, you're worthy.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough to tell yourself that, but it's just yeah, it's definitely something to try to keep in mind sometimes.
Yeah. Particularly, I think right now, as a lot of the issues Mindy's dealing with are more like in her family, but we all know social media has just kind of taken over everything, which just adds that third level on top of your friends and family and your self-stress for social media. And I know that can be a different monster in its own right.
I can't
how do you
even
deal with
imagine
that struggle?
I can't even imagine what just teenagers and kids have to go through right now growing up. Like, I experienced social media, the beginning of social media, and the power that it could have when I was younger. I would say it's still really hard to deal with. I don't have a lot of like power over it yet. It's definitely great to have people around you being able to be like, just, you know, it's people on the internet. Yeah, I remember that it's just people are usually either showing the best part of their life on the internet or being their worst self because they're behind a screen. So it's definitely like extremes to remember. Yeah, it's like it's really different, and I try to, for example, not be like, okay, I have this like Instagram, I have a lot of people. It's definitely a pressure of like the messages that I can put out and the people that I can reach with it. So I try to be really careful with that, and also acknowledge the people that are here and are nice and are like you know, fans and just kind people.
That's really good advice. Thank you. Thank you. So more on a lighter subject, with art and everything, how do you, did you end up going to school? Did you teach yourself? What's kind of been your process for the art that you make?
It's been a bit of both, actually. I went to like a specialized high school, which was like we were learning graphic design. So even though it was more like on the like logos and all of that, we did have like some classes where we learned art and just like to practice it. So it was like a good like base for me. When I graduated from that, I started working for a comic lettering studio as like a freelancer. So that was like my main job. And on the side for like 8 years, I was just drawing and building projects and like improving, I guess. Of like these 8 years, I've started professionally really working like 2 years ago. So I graduated in 2012. So it took me a long time. But I guess, I mean, I started pretty young. So definitely a bit of both.
That's cool. Cool. Do you have any like tools that are like your go-to pen or pencil or digital apps that you like to use for your art?
I've changed a lot of like I've experienced with a lot of things. I used to be fully traditional and all of that, but now it's Procreate and my iPad are my go-to. I actually do all my comic pages on Procreate. I feel like it feels like it's just like a pencil and a paper. It's it's very intuitive. It's like Photoshop has like so many tools around me that I'm just like, I'm lost. This is a lot. So this is definitely my go-to right now, and I've been using that for the past 2 years, and I really, really love it.
That's cool. Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about Procreate. So, because it's one of those that comes right with the iPad, right?
Oh, actually, you have to buy it, but it's really, really affordable. It's like $12 to own it. So yeah.
Okay, that's cool. It's really good to know. Just in case we've got anybody out there who's really interested in getting into the industry. So is doing the lettering something that is that kind of your window into doing comic books?
I guess yes and no. It definitely gave me more knowledge about how it works. And for a long time, it was really hard for me to actually read comic books because that's all I could see. So it was definitely interesting in that way. What really, I would say, helped me is when I decided to move to Canada, and I decided to, there were so many comic conventions all around here. So I've started going to New York, I've started going to the Toronto Comic Art Festival, which is like such a good con, and meeting people was definitely helpful. Even though I'd have to say that I'm also grateful for like social media, because you're able with that, you're really able to like put your art out there, and for people to like see it. So that was also a big help.
Do you have any preferences for the tools or feedback that you get on social media?
That's a very good question. Well, I don't really know. I guess feedback is always welcome, you know. It's definitely, it depends on like the way it is given, because, and I speak for my own person, but I feel like it's something that a lot of us share. Our crafts are often very personal to us. So for some people, it can be a very touchy subject. And I have to remember that I am my worst critique. I rarely like something that I put out. I know where the mistakes are. So when someone points something, I'm like, I already know. I've seen it. But it's usually, you know, it's helpful, and people not often do that to like being harmful whatsoever. And that's something that I actually seek when I do comic work from like my editors and all of that. I'm always like, do you have any notes? Do you have anything that I can improve on? It's like, do you want me to change? So I'd say it's often welcome, but it has to like definitely be given in a not a harsh way. Yeah, social media, because people can tend to be really harsh from there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to add in, that it, you know, how it's delivered is a good way to figure out whether you're going to actually take that into your own self and use it as feedback or not. I think that's really, really good advice.
I would also say a thing that I tell myself like often is, would you like someone, would it be a feedback or anything, but would you like someone to tell you that right now? Because I often see things on social media, or like comments or whatever, and I'm just like, this is not something that I would feel comfortable telling someone. So sometimes putting yourself on like someone else's shoes can be helpful.
Yeah, that's I think that's a really good point. So I had one other question actually on Eat and Love Yourself before we move on. Is there a particular food that is your favorite food that you will never turn on or feel stressed about at all?
Yes, bread. It's simple. It goes with everything. And it comes in every shape and color.
I totally relate. I tried for like 1 week to cut out bread in my diet, and it was the worst mistake of my life.
It is so hard. I've tried, I guess, to go like gluten-free about a year ago, and I was just like, this is going to be really impossible.
Yeah.
But it's just too good.
Yeah, that's what I tried to do too. And at the end of the week, I sat down with my boyfriend at the time and had a spaghetti dinner with like garlic bread on the side. And he was like, really? I was like, yes. I need all of the carbs. I wondered if it was actually chocolate because you used chocolate in the comic. So that's cool that it's actually bread.
Yeah. I would say chocolate is not far behind.
Totally understandable. So back to your art a bit, with your art space, because we kind of get a little tour here. Thank you for that. Do you have any like processes or rituals when you are ready to sit down and get to work?
Yeah, I like silence. I do work a lot in like silence, which is kind of weird. Or my go-to thing in the morning is to sit down and I choose a movie or something, and I put on my headphones so I'm not bothered. And I usually can go like a long time like that. Yeah. I guess it's definitely one of my main things. I know that I used to be in a studio with other people and it was great, but I do like not being disrupted.
I can understand. So you said you put on a movie or something. Is there a particular like genre or something that helps you for that?
I watch a lot of things. There's definitely things that are good just to be in the background. But I have to admit that I watch maybe a bit too much of true crime documentaries. So I will have my breakfast watching, that kind of stuff.
That's great. It's interesting. I'm trying to picture you like drawing your cute, Captain Marvel rising along to some murders going on in the background.
This is exactly that. Sometimes my partner who works next to me can hear and they sliced her throat and whatever. Like, what are you listening to? Nothing harmful, I promise.
Does that factor into any of the action scenes in some of the comics you draw?
Maybe, but not intentionally. I wonder now.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back and read some and see if I can see some of those influences there. So on the topic of Captain Marvel Rising, how did you get into that particular issue and title series?
It was also actually funny. This is pretty much the same time that, not pretty much, this is the same time that I've met my then editor at the studio for In and Love Yourself. I went to the Toronto Comic Art Festival in 2017. And I had my portfolio and everything, and I just waited in line for portfolio reviews. And I met an editor at IDW. We had a nice chat, ended up doing My Little Pony cover, which I was really thrilled about. And I think it was like 6 months later, they sent me an email being like, so we have this project. We're testing a few artists for it. See if you want to send us some samples. So I did sample cover for to try and be the cover artist and to also try and be the interior artist. And I guess 2 weeks later, I got an email being like, you're gonna be both. And I was completely mind-blowing to me. It still is. So yeah, that's how it happened.
That's great. It's been a fun series to keep up with. I feel like it does a good job of keeping kind of the seriousness that can go into being a superhero with some of the lightheartedness and friendship, but also I love when they do the little texts back in between. I think that's so relevant right now. It's just great.
Sam is a wonderful writer, and so often I would read the script and like laugh out loud. She would just create like the funniest scenes.
Yeah, it's a great title to any of our viewers. If you haven't picked it up, we've got them on Hoopla, but you can always go to your local comic book shop.
Yes, and it's great for kids too.
Yeah. It's so on that note, while we've got some of our viewers listening, I just want to let you know that if you're watching on YouTube, you can relay some questions to Sweeney, and we will go ahead and take a break in our conversation. So you can ask those questions, and we'll get right to them.
Yes.
In the meantime, if we're going on to some of those things, I know they deal with a lot of the ups and downs of life in Captain Marvel's series. What do you think is one of your proudest accomplishments?
I would say it was definitely moving to another country and leaving everything behind, my family and everything, and just starting fresh in a country that I had never been before. I moved when I was 22, out of the blue.
Yeah.
I didn't move here for a job or anything. It was really just a wild adventure.
How do you prepare for that?
I don't know. I remember I kind of blacked out. It was really stressful. Everything happened really quickly, especially because there's a lot of like visa to sort out, and I had to bring my cat with me, so that had to be sorted out as well. It was just really exciting. It was a bit rough when I got here for the first like a week or two, and I remembered myself going to a grocery store and started crying because I was like, everything is different. I don't understand.
Oh, no.
But it was really life-changing. So that's definitely something that I'm proud about. Yeah.
And yeah, that's a lot. I can't imagine. You said you originally were from France, and so
Yeah.
you're living in Canada now. Was there a language difference then to where you moved in Canada? Are you in a very French Canadian town?
I'm in a French Canadian town, but I would say maybe like it's a different kind of French. It's probably the same for like Americans and like British, different we have same words, but they mean like totally different things.
Oh.
Which is really interesting. It was really fun to learn. So it did give me a bit of like you're in some kind of like familiar territory, but not really.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine that'd be a lot to adjust to. Oh man, especially at 22. Well, good job for sure.
So Kat and Sweeney, we do have a question that came through chat.
Great.
So Sweeney, why comics over any other medium? Or do you maybe practice other forms of your illustrations? Different format?
I do definitely like to tell stories. I had thought about I don't know, at the beginning going in the animation industry, and but for some reason for me it looked just so much more technical that I was kind of like put off by that, and I really wanted to tell my own stories. I didn't think that they were that interesting, but I was just like, why not? So I think that was just the thing, to trying to tell my own story somehow.
That's cool. That's a good question. Yeah. And then you mentioned earlier that you kind of start with a character design and then a lot of it goes from there. Is that something you'd kind of learned with this program you had in school? Or is that just kind of like your personal starting point?
I feel like it's definitely my own starting point, because I've never seen myself as being a writer. And even though I technically am, it's still something that is hard for me to say, because it's not, my stories don't come to me through words where I'm like, oh, I have to write right now. It's always like a feeling. I have to draw, and I have a scene in mind, and I'm gonna draw a scene. And even when I used to, when I'm working on for example, my new book that I'm working on, the way I wrote it, I can't imagine any other artist working on it, because the way my script is written is really, I don't put much details into like, here's what happened in this panel, because I already kind of know.
Yeah.
it's very like, it's a feeling. I know what's happening in this scene, and I can draw it, and I can kind of be like putting like the balloons, like this is where they're supposed to go in the story. So I've kind of left myself here, but yeah.
That's great. I actually went to college for art originally myself, and my professors were always really big on thumbnails, and I was terrible at them. I hated doing them. I wanted to just put it down on paper right now as I saw it. Do you work from thumbnails, or do you also just kind of like want to go and do the image as you see it in your head?
Thumbnails is definitely something that I have to do. It's not my favorite part. Storyboarding is definitely also like the hardest. This is where you have to find the dynamic, and it's just but I think it's because it's the hardest part for me that it's probably the most gratifying. This is where the like sometimes there's a vibe that I'm able to get in my thumbnails. I'm like, okay, this is actually really good. That I feel like if I was like going to work on the page right away, I would have a tough time. But they're definitely, I can totally understand you on that. They're so like intimidating.
Yeah. It's when I was really young, I didn't value them as I should, because I saw them as kind of a waste of time to the real work. But now that I'm older, I realize how much more planning and positioning things right can really help you out in a thumbnail, even if it's not as detailed or as big.
Have you pursued art like a little further after school?
Oh, myself? Sometimes, yeah. I do some on the side. I do a lot of freelancing, but I realized very much that I'm a very selfish artist. I don't like to be told what to draw. So
that's fair.
So I realized that perhaps it's not my main way to go with life, because I don't enjoy it unless it's just for myself.
I feel like it's something that if definitely, like, it's good that you're able to like to listen to yourself, like, I'm not enjoying it that way, I'm enjoying it this way. So
yeah, I have a lot of friends who went on from art school to do professional art jobs, and I'm very happy for them. And it's just reaffirmed that 21-year-old me, I think, would have been very disappointed at 32-year-old me, but 21-year-old me didn't know what was yet to come.
Well, good for you.
Thank you, though, for that question. Yeah, I enjoy talking art. It's good to get back into that. If you had a superpower, what would your superpower be?
So it's something that I've actually thought a lot about. It would be to be able to like control time, so I could like stop it, work on my deadline, and just like reactivate and be like, here's the full work and on time.
Wouldn't that be great to just through the boring parts of life?
That would be amazing. I would never be late. And I could actually take the time that I need to do the things.
Yeah. I always loved that part in The Sims and was sad that I couldn't do it in real life.
Right. That's so true.
Especially when it comes to working out. Like, couldn't I just get on the treadmill for 40 minutes and then be good to go?
Yeah, totally.
The time, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because that's one of the things I thought a lot about while reading Eat and Love Yourself is how many of her flashbacks, and then when she'd come back again, having experienced that, how many times did Mindy want to like go back and play that through differently, or did seeing those scenes help her realize where she was now and be grateful for it?
That's actually interesting, because when we started developing the story, I was wondering if the best course of action would be to have her interact and maybe be there and be able to change what happened. But in a more like retrospective kind of way, it's not something that you're able to do. And even going through therapy, and it's definitely, I feel like Love Yourself and her going back in time, it's her sitting on the couch with a therapist and being like, oh, do you remember a moment that was very triggering for you? Or sometimes definitely in the back of her mind of like, I don't know, I don't think so. But then something that seems very small, like for example, Mindy being like some like kids giving her comments at school, can be a first trigger for that. So it was definitely more of like, this is something that happened, this is something that cannot be changed, and this is something that is the reason why the character is there right now, but that doesn't mean that it cannot be turned into a bad thing, into like a good thing. Like it's something that you need to accept and move on from. So yeah, that was probably the main reason why I've also myself came to the conclusion of like, things are the way they are, and maybe try to appreciate them for that.
I think that's excellent advice. Put that on a poster. That's great. I read an article. We're all dealing with COVID now, obviously, which is why we're doing this live. And I read an article recently that that's something a lot of people have collectively struggled with, more of this introspective time that we've had to deal with now. And I know I myself have had some times during this where like, oh, if only I could like go back and just have done that differently. So I think it's really important to mention that you can't go back, and it's okay. You can do better in the future.
Exactly. And like, I don't know about you, but when COVID first started, there was this first for like, I guess the first month of like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore, I can't do all these things, and definitely living in this like this past of like, what's gonna happen, to, and I feel like it's weird to say, to actually kind of appreciate this like timeout of calm and being like, well, we never know what's actually going to happen, so why not just try to like accept that, and of like a more of a day by day kind of thing. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that's good. Did COVID affect a lot of how you get your work done, or has it relatively stayed the same?
It was definitely things like changed at the beginning. I think we were all just kind of like taken aback of like, oh, there's a lot of things that are shutting down. How are we going to be able to do that? So, for example, Marvel and Captain Marvel had like to be put on hold for a little bit. But I would say I'm lucky enough that I was already working freelance, and that working on comic books is relatively easy for us to like navigate, even though, well, of course, libraries and like comic book shop were definitely struggling. But I think 6 months into it, everyone started to like find a way to just live with it, kind of.
Yeah, we've been real fond of the term the new normal around here.
I bet. Because I assume it's probably the same for you. You probably had like to shut down for X amount of time and all of that.
Yeah, we had a good part where we did totally shut down, and we're just kind of like waiting. Like, I mean, working in a library, there's not much you can do remotely. So it was very interesting to just kind of have to wait to see what happened. And then luckily we were able to open up and just have staff inside the building, and we'd run books out to people. So that was kind of a fun experience. And now we are open, and it's just masks on, but it's great to be open again.
It's good because like definitely with COVID and all that, people definitely needed and still do like the entertainment of books and all of that. So
yeah. On that note, I can't get by having worked at a library without asking you, do you have a favorite book or a favorite author?
Okay, so that's a very good question. My partner introduced me to Kurt Vonnegut. He was a big fan, and I was just like, I don't know anything about Kurt Vonnegut. So even though I have so very little knowledge about him, I feel like he's a really interesting author that I want to discover more about, and more about his books and all of that.
Yeah, that's cool. My father-in-law is also a big fan of Kurt Vonnegut. I've read a couple of him because my father-in-law. Yeah, he's definitely a very interesting writer. I think even still that is he writes in a way that's so rarely. I've never seen anything like his books written by anybody else.
Exactly, and actually, one of his books was turned into a graphic novel not long ago, and It was just, even like as a graphic novel, it looks different because it's like Kurt Vonnegut. So it has this like little thing.
I'll have to check that out. I'm gonna make a note of that.
It was Slaughterhouse 5.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course.
What are some things that motivate you? Do you find inspiration outside of art that helps you draw better? You mentioned movies, but is there anything else?
It's funny because people would assume, or that like, because I work in comics, I read a lot of comic books, and not really. I tend to watch a lot of movies. I love fashion. Sometimes I'm going to see an outfit and I'm going to be like, it's either something I want to wear or it's something that I so want to wear that I can't, that I'm going to have to draw it. So often I love rethinking, superhero outfits in a more casual way. Fashion is definitely a big one, and something that I can play with a lot. So movies, different periods, different era, like, are gonna inspire me a lot.
It comes through in your art. One of my favorite things to keep up with is your redrawings of different costumes for various different fun art. I think that's really creative. Yeah. So if viewers out there haven't seen it, some of her redesigns of costumes is definitely great.
Thank you. It's such a fun thing for me to do. So I'm glad you appreciate it.
What do you think is, let's see, I asked what your favorite author is already, I guess, so I can't go back to that one. Speaking of food, because I'm just a big food person, and we know that kind of ties into there. If you could share your favorite meal, so bread, with 4 individuals or heroes, who would you pick?
That's an interesting question, because what I tell myself all the time is like, there's a lot of people that I would like to interact with, but do these people want to interact with me? It's a conversation.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I would say Brian Lee O'Malley was definitely a big inspiration for me when I started reading graphic novels, Scott Pilgrim and all of that. It's just it's such an influential comic series. And, it was turned into a movie, and so many things happened, so that's just, I feel like there would be a lot of like good stories to learn. Yeah, that's man, that's a tough question.
Yeah, no pressure. Just off the top of your head, 4 people.
I'm trying to think about it. It's funny because the other people that I think about are not necessarily comic book related, but Gloria Steinem, definitely a lot of like, I don't necessarily want to have a conversation. I just want to hear stories that she has to say, because she's such an interesting person.
I can understand that. As someone who likes conventions too, sometimes it's good enough to just be in the same room with somebody.
Oh, it's my favorite. I don't think I'll necessarily have good questions, and that's why I like podcasts. It's like you get told stories in conversation, and you don't have to interact with them, which is great. Man, that's the only 2 that comes to my mind right now.
That's okay.
Can I return the question?
Yeah, we can come back to it later. Yeah.
What about you?
What about me? Let me think. Oh gosh. Well, one of my all-time favorite authors is Neil Gaiman. So if I could break some bread with him, I think, even if it was just for 15 minutes, I think that would be a treat. I guess I should have come up with my own answers to these questions.
No, Gaiman is good though. It's a really good answer.
Yeah, I've loved his Sandman. My daughter's named Coraline. I love all of his stuff.
Adorable.
Let's see, I'd probably also want to eat with Anne Hathaway. I think she's a really cool actress who's done a cool variety of movies. So let's see, I feel like I should pick like also a very important historical person. Jane Goodall was one of my heroes growing up. I used to toy with the idea of working with animals, so it would be really cool to eat with her. Oh, but a fourth one. Oh. Yeah, I don't know. This is a hard question. I should have thought about this before I asked you.
No, it's a very good question.
Probably Noelle Stevenson.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I just love everything she's written, and I'm so proud that she got to do the She-Ra series. It's just great watching her.
It was an amazing show.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see, do we have any audience questions too? Because we've got some time. If we have any.
Yeah, thank you. Here's a question. So, Sweeney Boo, how do you feel, or do you review your work from the past? Like, do you ever revisit previous characters or comics that you had made?
I do. I guess I've done it. It's always really nice to see the improvement. I had a weird phase in my art back in like 2012, 2013 that I don't know, my shapes were strange. I'm really embarrassed about it. Sometimes it's hard to not just be embarrassed about it. So I do it from time to time, but it's definitely something that I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I draw this that way? I don't even want to see it anymore. Even though it's not something that I necessarily do often, I love when other artists do it. It's always so fun to see where people started, or like even through like just a year of work, how things can change. It's really interesting.
Yeah,
Very
some of those
cool.
artist challenges are pretty cool when artists do those. I know Loish is always really big at it.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
People know what Loish. I would be embarrassed. I also don't like to look at my past stuff. So
it's really hard. Even it's funny, and it's not like love yourself is still really important to me, and it's always going to be. But it's just such like a different part of my life, and different part of my art as well, that I'm unable to read or reread my work when I get them. I usually get my books, I'm like, oh, they look so great, I'm putting them away. It's so hard for me to look at them.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, there's a couple of books I helped do some illustrations for, and that's definitely the same thing I did. I got very excited, and then I didn't want to crack them open. I was like, I'm just going to show you the cover, and we're going to put it right here.
Are you able to like share it with people that you know, or are you also like very shy about that?
I'm very shy. Yeah, I'm very shy about it. It's weird. I feel more comfortable sharing stuff online to strangers than I do sharing with my own friends and family.
That's actually very true and very fair. Yeah, because I feel like I feel like you're like, it's like putting yourself on the spotlight when you share it with family and friends, and their reaction. You want something like true and kind of like objective.
Yeah, it's a torn, because I feel like if I share it with my friends and family, well, I look conceited, like, look at what I made, but then also like they're either going to be, I feel worried they're going to be fake nice, or I feel worried that they're going to be too harsh because they know me, and a stranger across the world is going to be less, and I care about what they think, which is the other thing.
They're just a little bit less involved.
Yeah.
So here's another question, Sweeney. So when you're working as the illustrator, working with an author, how much compromise goes into your artistic vision of their story? Like, how does the communication typically work? Is it a collaboration, or do they have kind of the final say?
I tend to like not be too strong-minded when I work on something and with someone. I feel like I want to respect their vision and the way they see things. But I do like when I have just a little bit of freedom to be like, this, I love what you did. Here's my interpretation of it. So when we definitely cook together. For example, I do love getting a script, because scripts can be like a written very differently depending of like the writer. But getting a script that is not too specific on first panel has to be, for example, horizontal, and this is this kind of view that we're having, and a more of like view of the forest or something, more of like a general idea, so I can definitely just like work the page with like the way I feel it could work. So that's definitely a way I love to work. But if I work with someone who has a specific idea, I try to definitely be easygoing and like go with the flow. So that's why it's interesting when we work with different collaborators. Yeah.
Very cool.
Sorry.
Oh, so a supplemental question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Is there anyone that you have worked with or are continue working with that you would like to work with again, or anyone who else would be kind of your dream collaborators?
Oh, there's so many. Working with Sam Max was just a blast. It's definitely something that I would love to do again. I've always been a big fan of Mariko Tamaki's writing, and that it's like on her own graphic like novel work, or even that what she does on like with like DC and all of that. It would be a privilege. I would be amazed. So yeah, it's definitely something that someone that I would love to work with.
Great, thank you.
Of course.
Do you have, let's see, what would you say is maybe the most difficult part about being an artist for a living?
Well, there's multiple things. I would say the first one, the time management. Because and I feel like it's being an artist, but also being a freelancer, you have to be your own assistant, and you have to do multiple jobs. So art is like, I would say like probably 50% of my work, because answering emails and interacting with people and like reading scripts and all that, it's definitely something that takes like also a lot of time. So it's something that sometimes I have to just mentally deal with, because sometimes I get up and I just want to go and draw all day, but I can't.
Yeah.
And time management can be really tough because, well, I feel like it's something that everybody kind of knows as an artist. It's like deadlines can be very, very intense, and I tend to be extremely stressed out about them.
Yeah.
So something that I try to work with.
Do you have like a key system that kind of helps you keep your time management? It's something I struggle with too. So I very much rely on my key system.
It is so hard. I have like an agenda that I like write in every day, but I've realized that I need to do it in like a pencil, so I can actually erase and just like change stuff all the time. But I feel like because I worked for 2 years in a video game studio, the way we used to work was like we were planning the week. We were planning the entire game, but it's like this week, here's our goals. So that's the way I try to see it with my comic work. It's like, here's the final goal. How do I need to like break that? And how many weeks, and what do I need to do per day? And trying to like do it like that. Sometimes it's hard because I give myself too many goals during the day and I don't hit them, and it's hard. But I try to get myself in check with that.
Yeah, that's actually the exact system I used. I found the passion planner a couple of years back because I could not get myself to study for the GRE. So yeah, that's the same method they use in that planner, is you take the big goal and then you break it down in portions and portions and portions and portions. And yeah, once I learned that system, helped me stay on top of things because I used to be the worst.
I talk with people often and they tell me that they don't have a schedule, and I'm just like, how do you do it?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to remember anything or know what to do.
Right.
It feels impossible to live that way.
Yeah, because I have my schedule, but I still have my Google Calendar with alerts telling me, oh, now you need to do this.
Right, because like, I don't know, like there's so much that we need to remember every day that I'm glad we have that.
Yeah. You've shared so much wisdom with us today. Thank you so much.
No, it's wisdom that I should use.
Right? It's always hardest to listen to your own advice.
So we have one more question, I think, if you guys are ready for it. So Sweeney, how has your relation with comics changed since you started becoming this amazing produced artist?
Oh gosh. Well, I do not see myself that way at all. I'm always so grateful and like amazed, and I feel incredibly lucky every time I get an email or someone who wants to work with me, because I try to keep in mind that I've worked really hard to get where I am, but that doesn't mean that it's going to last forever. So I feel very lucky, and I try to keep that in mind every day and just be like, I don't know, everything could stop tomorrow. So I feel like I'm trying to just stay the same, and also being alone at home in my little studio. It's trying to, like, I don't know, be humble. And I don't like being like, oh, I'm humble, because it also means that I should be proud. I don't know. It's just like, I just want to take it easy and be grateful with the work I have and I get. I feel very privileged about that.
What a good answer. Well, before we wrap up here, I just want to ask if you've got any projects in the works we should look out for.
Yes. My next graphic novel is coming out next year. It's called Over My Dead Body, and it's a big one that I wrote, and it's about witches, and it takes place in an academy, and it's kind of like a thriller, scary mystery. It was a big challenge, and still a big challenge, and it's something that is really that I'm really looking forward to share with people. It's coming out with HarperCollins.
Awesome. I've been keeping up with some of the updates. I love the little witch hats. I'm excited.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm so excited about it.
Well, thank you a million for coming in and joining us here in Champaign today. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk about your craft and your tips. And hopefully we've got some little artists out there inspired to follow along with you the rest of your career, because I know it's gonna be great.
Oh, well, I hope so. But thank you so much for having me. It's a great opportunity and everything. It was really fun.
Thank you. Well, take care, Sweeney.
You too. Thank you so much.
Happy Free Comic Day.